This is Jane Low on site at Marceline Woodlands area, the area in Singapore that borders Malaysia. And with me today, I'm very pleased and very privileged to have George Wong, who is the Head of Growth of Singapore and Malaysia with the Sandbox. So thank you, George, for joining us today. Very privileged. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So George, for our audience who are not too familiar with the Sandbox, right? Could you just give a brief introduction, because I think it's a lot more than just a game, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the Sandbox is a decentralized virtual world which houses more than 300 different brands building in it. So, it's powered by blockchain technology, which allows you to have true digital ownership of all the assets that you see in the game itself. So we call it a game loosely, but it's more of a kind of a virtual experience that anyone who has a social account can just jump right in and experience all the unique experiences that is being built by various brand partners that we have.
Right, yeah. So we are going to talk about this ecosystem building efforts that you want to get all your partners and the users to come together. But you also touch on the point, before we go into that, you touch on the point about this virtual environment. So can you explain to our audience the difference between, say, a metaverse and the virtual environment that you're painting? Because I think a lot of people still have many different definitions of what it means to them.
Well, in many cases, they are both one and the same, just that I would say that the term metaverse is kind of a developing concept. Obviously, it's not a new term. It's been coined 20 years ago. And the idea behind metaverses is the same, right? Where anyone can come into a virtual space and kind of have like a parallel experience with the real world. So, and in the digital space. The difference is recently why the rise of the term metaverse and why so many people are going into it is actually because of blockchain technology, right? And in the past, if you play any virtual world game, we have a metaverse experience. There are whether they are in the form of video games or social experience games.
Virtual reality.
Right. Most of them are basically just games. You can have transactions in the game. You can buy, sell, you can own digital items. But the difference is that those items are like software, are like code, right? So where's the difference? So one of the things that you can't do with those items is that you can only use those items in that particular game. You can't use it and you can't trade it with another game, for example, for another item in game. But with blockchain technology, what happens is that all these assets becomes NFTs. And NFTs now are tradable. They are more tangible. And they are traded outside of the game. You don't trade them inside the game. You trade them outside of the game.
I see. Okay.
That's the difference, right? So imagine if you you play the game, and you're a gamer, and you've played the game for let's say 1,000 hours, okay, which is a lot of time to spend on a game, and then you earn a particular item, okay. So this item you can many games allow you to trade it in the game, but many also don't. Right? They don't allow trading. So imagine you've played 1,000 hours, you put money into the game, you spend time in the game, but for a while, maybe you grow out of it or you get tired of it, right? And you leave the game. So what happens is that all this money and time you spend in the game, the items are wasted in a way. But with NFTs, you can choose to sell it to someone. Like I've put in X amount of input to earn this NFT. Then, and I don't want to play this game anymore. I want to try other games, but I've earned these assets. Now I can transfer the value to someone who's willing to pay me for the 1,000 of hours of time I've spent in the game. So this is one example for the gaming side of things, right? But on the social side, it's different because if you look at it, in the digital space, we have this thing called social currency. Right, so people care a lot about what they put on their Facebook. They care a lot about what they put on their Instagram, and what they show is a very important aspect of defining who they are. That means that your social page is actually representing you, right?
Yeah.
So in the metaverse now, and because everything that we own and buy is a representation of ourselves or our value. And in the metaverse, you can also showcase it. So for example, I can buy art from an artist who sold it as an NFT.
Yeah.
Then I can go into the metaverse and I can display that art in my metaverse space,
Right,
in my virtual home.
Right.
But it's real art. It's not just some JPEG file from
Okay.
the website somewhere you copy and paste it, but it's literally something that you own. And this aspect of ownership is very important. And you can own anything in the metaverse. You can own art, you can own music, you can own the very land that you are walking around on in the metaverse. Digital land is probably the biggest economy in the metaverse right now because metaverses are new. So like when you build a new world, right? Let's say you explore a new world or a new country that has been never explored before. The first thing that people own is the land. Then people build things on top of the land. And then whatever that's on top of the land are also items. So the logic is the same. Why land is very big now? It's because we are building a new world and everyone is rushing to own land in the new world. Okay? Once all the land is sold, then people will start looking at the houses on the land,
Right.
the items
okay.
on the land.
But surely it's infinite amount of land you can build in the virtual world, isn't it?
So that's the unique thing. It's by design.
Yeah.
So in the case of the Sandbox, our land is finite. It's fixed.
Okay.
So we have 64 plots of land.
Oh.
It's fixed.
Okay.
And once all land is sold, then there can be no more new land created.
Okay.
So that scarcity aspect gives it value. There's a few reasons for it. It's not scarcity for scarcity's sake. If you have infinite land, so the problem with metaverses is that people argue, wow, you can make as much land as possible.
That's right.
So why do I want to go into it? Now, firstly, blockchain ensures that if you design it to be limited, it stays limited, right? You can't change it just because you want to. Even the creators cannot change that rule, right? So that's one beautiful thing about the blockchain technology, right? So there's a check and balance. That's one of the features of it. The other thing is that by making it limited in nature, we can focus on building. When you make unlimited land, so everyone owns a lot of land, but everything is empty, right? Nobody focuses on building and they just focuses on just making like more land ownership. It becomes a commodity. When it's commoditized, people don't value it. When people don't value it, what happens is that people don't spend time creating value. But when your land is limited, you're not going to leave it empty. You either will try to build something on
Right,
it, create
okay.
it. And this is key to our ecosystem
Right,
building.
yeah, that's my next question,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so what are you looking for people to build on the land?
Yeah. So here's the thing about the Sandbox. Firstly, we understand that user-created or user-generated content is very important. If you go into a metaverse and it's empty, you're not going to have a lot of stickiness. People are not going to come back.
There's
right?
no much social interaction.
Not even social interaction, just things to do. Right?
Things to do,
Just
okay.
things to do, right? So for example, you want to go into a metaverse and you walk a little bit, you can explore a gallery, you can listen to good music by one of the artists like Steve Aoki or Snoop Dogg, or you want to look at fashion, maybe Gucci's doing something on fashion. So the point is you want to go in and depending on your personal interests, there is something for you to do.
Right,
Correct?
okay.
All right. But if you go into a metaverse and it's empty, then nobody's going to come
Yeah,
back.
why bother,
Why
right?
bother, right?
Yeah.
So user-generated content is really, really important. That's
Okay.
kind of why we first one of the things we did was we wanted to introduce culture that you are familiar with.
Oh,
That's why we
okay.
deal with brands and companies who they don't just come into the Sandbox and just say, I want to sell virtual items. That's not the first point. Always when we speak with brand partners, we talk about asking them to innovate the way they engage with the audience. So they will do an experience. So some people want to share with you their heritage, give you a deeper understanding of the brand, right? Give you an example. A lot of people don't know, but if you play Snoop Dogg's Mansion, which is Snoop Dogg, right? So everybody knows who Snoop Dogg is, but they don't know much about Snoop Dogg, the person, right? So if you played it, actually what it does is it lets you discover bits of history about Snoop Dogg. Okay, the other artist that did a similar thing is Sueko under Warner Music Group, right? So if I'm not mistaken, but the idea of playing the game is to give you a bit more backstory. So if you're like a Snoop Dogg fan, for example, you learn a bit more about Snoop Dogg. Your brand connection with him is stronger because that's an example, right? So it's about being creative in building in the Sandbox space. It's not just about copying the real world. What I mean by copying the real world is if it's, for example, you say that I have a shop. and I'm selling goods in the shop. We don't immediately say, oh, just build a shop in the metaverse. That's very lazy. Because you see, when people go in the digital space, it's different than real world, right? Window shopping is interesting in the real world.
Yes.
Right? Because you walk, you
can
see,
touch it,
you can touch,
yeah,
you can,
you can smell,
and you can,
yeah.
and you can, and there's a lot of people, environment. But in the digital space, it's different. You have people, yes. But avatars, right? But it's different in that sense. So, and you don't actually get the same experience. So it's better to have a complementary experience. It's just this is any game, right? Any game, there are hyper realistic
immersion type
graphics with VR goggles and VR glasses, etc. But those they're still working to make it two things, right? As intuitive as possible. Like you put it on, immediately you can interact, and at the same time affordable, right? So it's not that they're not great technologies, but they're actually really expensive. And the third thing that I think that is a challenge with those kind of technology for experiences is the fact that to build content for hyper-realistic or VR type of game or metaverse is that it requires a certain level of skill.
Oh, right, okay.
Right? You need skill to do 3D design and art. So one of the things that we tell ecosystem partners, and it's something that we are educating people, why the Sandbox uses those voxel art, the block designs, right?
Right.
It's because it is easier for the regular person who doesn't have an art background to create content.
Okay.
Because it's like building Lego.
So I can go in and create content even though,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, a lot of our creators don't come from an art background.
Okay.
They come from like maybe they are engineers or they're architects and not exactly artists per se.
Or just students.
Okay. Right? Who just enjoy creating. And because it's very Lego-like, block-like, it's easy for us to create. And we have software that is no code, so you don't need to have coding knowledge to make a game or to create an NFT design, voxel art in the Sandbox, right? We're using our software called VoxEdit and GameMaker. So we are trying to make it as easy as possible for people to build in the Sandbox.
So what kind of use cases are you looking for people to build? Many of us are not Snoop Dogg type celebrities, right?
So I think this is the most common question. I think firstly for many companies, if we start from the company level, I think companies need to determine what is their objective and who they're targeting in the metaverse first. So it's usually a discussion and a process that we do with our partners, right?
Oh, I see.
We discuss with them because metaverses are very new. So everything is kind of new. Some of it is experimental. Some of it is slightly proven. So the key point is that first we ask them, okay, who are you targeting? What are you trying to promote? Okay. Or what are you trying to deliver to your target? Right, and this can be also in the form of just like games, right? Or it could be experiences. So it's very subjective. So that's why, like in the case of artists, it's about helping their fans to kind of like enjoy the music. Okay. So that's why their land is always very music driven because they are singers, right? Obviously, or DJs, etc. Okay. And at the same time to kind of promote the artist. So that was the purpose, right? In the case of Snoop Dogg, his mention was, I have a beautiful mansion that none of my fans can see because it's private. So he uses the Sandbox as a way to show his private residence in a safe environment, you know? Yeah. So it's to give something to the fans. So that's why we always encourage brands a few points, right? When they want to build in the metaverse. The first thing is, they really don't want to replicate, right? They just need to be creative when it comes to building the experience. And at the same time, it's about rewarding your customers or your fans. Don't focus on monetizing. I think that's the key problem. The first and foremost is brands have to know how to connect with their audience in this new channel. Because to many companies, this is a new channel, right? You have your social media, you have your direct chat messages, you've got ads, you've got TV, and metaverses are like another channel. So if you look at it as another channel, then they have to think about how they engage first, and that requires practice. And different brands, the engagement is always slightly different. Firstly, they need to talk about it and find ways to reward fans. So they can build mechanics where fans can be strong supporters and they can reward them as well, right? And but a lot of this can only happen if brands and companies are open to NFT technology. A lot of times there's a lot of negative reputation about NFTs because people think NFTs are like speculative, and true, in the market there is speculative NFTs, but there are also speculative stocks, right? The point is to create and also adopt good use cases, right?
Yep.
So there's a lot of use cases for NFTs. In many cases, we also encourage them as a reward, give them out, experiment by giving them out. And the NFTs could be like tickets to access your land for an experience. So you don't need to put the speculative thing if you're worried about that, right? So it's a form of reward. Imagine if you do a music festival and you give them an NFT ticket. The NFT ticket can give you access to the real event and also give you maybe like Metaverse experience, like add-on, right? So one of the partners we are dealing with, they're still considering onboarding, but I really like their idea, is that they're actually doing music festivals, okay? So, but they are trying to sell the real music festival experience, right? Because they're doing big concerts and all that. But because they're international, sometimes if you're from like the other end of the world in the US, for example, you have no idea if this festival is fun or not. So what they do is they sell you like a virtual ticket. They build a virtual experience of the actual festival, give you like a preview of the music, the setting, you know, of the party, and also like a demo of the, and they also gamify, and you can earn something that gets you maybe a discount off your ticket, for example. So it gives people that kind of like, oh, okay, this looks fun, I would want to go for the real thing. So you complement your business. That's, to me, it's an interesting way of doing it. Okay. And the ticket that you get, the NFT, can be designed as a memorabilia. It can be in the form of the artist that is for the concert or a music instrument. It can be anything to your imagination. And people can display this in the Metaverse or in their social profile linked with their NFT wallet. So if brands kind of like adopt NFTs, the potential is quite big, right? And that's the stickiness. And, you know, after the event is over, they still be talking about it. Hey, I actually went to the event. I have the ticket for the event. I can show it to you. And the ticket looks really cool. So you create conversation, right? So I think embracing the whole NFT culture, so to speak, in a positive way, it will be a huge benefit, because for now, it's very much intangible assets,
correct,
right? But later on, you will find that NFTs will start to attach to physical assets, right?
Yes, that's right.
Because of that ownership aspect. There is already use cases. One of the most expensive NFTs sold was actually for a house that was sold for 175,000 USDC, right? And the ownership of the NFT is still there. Like, people own that house. I don't know if the owner actually lives there, right? But they have attached it. It's like the case study. So everyone's experimenting, and that's great. And I think in Singapore especially, it's a hotbed for that innovation. And that's on the enterprise level. But when it comes to like individuals, creators, and builders, metaverses are actually a very interesting way to actually have a presence for your art and sell them to a global market.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Right? So I know many artists who survived during the pandemic because they couldn't do commercial work, right? They couldn't go out, do commission work for clients. So they actually sold their art as NFTs. And the Metaverse is a great place for you to have your own gallery, because a lot of people don't know most galleries around the world curate. Which also means that although you might be good, but if your networking is not good, you don't actually get featured in galleries.
Exactly, yeah.
So the artists don't get to feature their work, even though they might be very good, and they give up a lion's share of the profits of revenues on the sale to the gallery. Usually it's about 40 to 60%.
Oh, I won't be surprised. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but understandably, because galleries have a business, physical space, etc. But it's still very painful for a lot of artists. So artists that are probably not of that stature, but once they get global recognition or acceptance, is actually able to showcase in the Metaverse. And Sandbox is no exception. Artists can easily build their own gallery if they own like a plot of land, or they in future rent land if they don't want to own it. And from there, they can build their own virtual space, which immediately people can click on their artwork and buy it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the
That's
powerful part of
That's right, yeah.
of the sandbox, right? So that's just one simple example, but there's so many others.
I look forward to the day when all the creators are able to actually realize real value from their creations, because at the moment you sort of have to pass through so many sort of hurdles
Yes.
to get your work recognized, like as you say. So
Correct.
the day will come when NFTs are no longer seen as with negative connotations, and people realize the power of enabling artists, painters,
Correct,
musicians to showcase their work. Yeah. So, George, I'm very conscious of the time. But one last question before we go. Recently, I read about this Singapore couple holding a wedding in. I believe is it the Sandbox?
It's the Sandbox. Yes.
Sandbox.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So I look forward to the day when we can have this interview in the Sandbox.
It will be soon, for sure.
Yes, yeah.
Sooner than later.
That would be fantastic, really.
Yes, it would be.
So thank you very much, George, for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.